Welcome to the Buds Reality Show. I'm Sean Collins, the guy with a lot to say. And Buds has gone international, apparently, because last week we had Lady Liberty from Australia, and this week we have Mr. Stephen McNamara from Scotland. How you doing, brother?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm glad we're finally doing this. We probably talked about this a long time ago, and it just didn't happen. And now here we are, and I'm glad to have you. And you're over there in Scotland, man, and a lot of things are happening there too, and this is what I'm kind of trying to, bring to light, that, the dystopia isn't just happening in the United States. It's happening everywhere. And some places are worse than others, so let's just dig in, man. So like, how are things in Scotland? What is the political landscape in Scotland right now?
Right. Well, I have to be careful what I say because I might get arrested for talking. So that's how bad things are at the moment. Thankfully, we have hopefully ridiculed the new hate crime laws enough to make them unworkable, but a handful of people have suffered. The political landscape itself, though, is rather complicated. And there are videos on YouTube that explain the politics of Scotland and the UK, maybe better than I can do right now. But basically, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom with 4 other countries and other bits and pieces added onto it. Within that, we have some devolved parliaments, if you can call them that. They're more kind of administrations, assemblies, probably the equivalent of the difference between Washington and the individual states, where the states can apply some of their own laws, but whatever the main parliament, or in your case, the central government decides it wants to make a decision, then it overrules. So it can be quite complicated. And then you get local councils and things, but not everything is democratic. There's a lot of appointed positions and things like that. So it is quite baffling. We're in this complicated position at the moment where the chief of police in Scotland sits as on this main part of the Scottish government, but it's supposed to be a completely independent position. But it's this sort of, Schrodinger's police chief. Who's she working for? Is she working for the police, or is she working for the government? And as we've seen in the last year, certain members of the previous government and the high headwinds of the political party, the Scottish National Party, have all faced arrest and charges and various other things, and even ongoing investigations to the current First Minister, John Swinney, with the allegation of fraud, I think it is, with them using government paid postage stamps to put out marketing material for a political campaign. But the person that's working for him and his predecessors, who were all arrested and stuff like that, she's in charge of the police force that arrested them. It's just so complicated and so baffling. It's like, no, it needs to be completely separated, because at the moment it is just a police state, and it seems to be, whenever the government gets upset about something, people get arrested, but when something else happens in the street between two ordinary folk, that never seems to get done.
That's kind of interesting to hear that, actually, because, usually, when things happen in the streets, they go after those people first rather than the other side, that you just talked about. But you guys actually have, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on so quick, is you guys have a big election coming, and it actually happens to land on July 4th of all days. Of all days, it's your presidential presidential election, I should say, or your prime minister, if I should say, right?
Yeah, sort of. Our government works slightly different. So our head of state isn't a president, but a royal, King Charles in this instance. So when we have an election at UK level or even just national level, whoever wins that election then has to go and seek permission to form a government. And then every time a law is passed, the king or queen, whoever happens to be sitting on the throne, is the one who finally passes it.
Oh, so the parliament is still kind of, or I should say the monarchy. The monarchy is still kind of relevant in government then, yeah?
On paper, yes. In practice, they just tick whatever box the government asks them to tick. So it's never happened in my lifetime that the government has been overruled by the monarch. So in effect, if it is pretty much the leader of the party that wins the election, they become prime minister, just as you would have a presidential election. So in practice, it's very, very similar, and the end result is very, very similar, but there's little nuances that make it slightly different.
Okay, so now when it comes to your prime minister election, is there a Libertarian Party that is somewhat relevant over there, or is there a Libertarian Party at all, or is there any type of movement outside of people like you? Like, obviously, I know where you stand on the liberty point of things, but is there any type of movement over there that's trying to change the landscape? I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, there is, but how libertarian they actually are leaves a lot of unanswered questions. The Reform Party has in its policies that, in its agreement that they push for a more libertarian side of government, but at the same time, there's not one libertarian policy within what they've promised as part of the election campaign. So I don't know if libertarian is the correct word to use for them. However, they have stood in almost every single constituency, as we call them, seats that make up the parliament, and they are polling neck and neck with the current ruling party.
Okay.
But the current ruling party are going to get wiped out or close to wiped out by the Labour Party, who are heavy left-wing socialists. And I think what's happened is the Conservative Party, who have run the current government for the last 14 years or so, they've moved so far to the left that they're completely unrecognisable. So it's ended up.
That sounds very similar to what's happened here. Like, but also what's happening here is, the Republican Party is no longer Republican, and the Democratic Party is no longer Democratic. Like, it's very bizarre how the tables have turned. Like, the Republicans have kind of sided more with the left, but then the actual Democrats themselves, who are supposed to be the left, have gone into like super fascist communist mode. And not to say that the right hasn't gone into the fascist, communist mode yet. I believe they're more authoritarian than they are fascist on the right here. If that makes any sense to anyone, but it's one of those things where it's all in the same bubble, and we have this saying here in the States, elephants and asses will always screw the masses, you know, and it's been happening for decades here. And now it's the same thing here in the United States, where the right is agreeing with the left on a lot of things, and the policies that are driven from it are driving the country right into the dirt. And I feel like it's kind of happening across the board. Is that kind of what's going on over there?
Pretty much. It just seems to be a race to the bottom, and even the Labour Party, who are lined up pretty much in the polls to take over the government with a huge majority and a huge swing their way, it's mostly people who want to get rid of the current lot, and they have no idea what they're actually voting for. It is completely bizarre, and the leader of the Labour Party is acting as though he doesn't really want to win the election. Every time he speaks, he comes up with something, and it's like, oh no, he loses his position in the polls every time he speaks, and whenever he remains silent, he starts climbing the polls again. So it's it's hard to. And Rishi Sunak, the current prime minister, he's making all these. He thinks they're promises, but you know they sound more like threats. What was his latest one? Was bringing in national conscription again, stuff like that, mandatory service in the army and things. It's just like, you trying to lose the election? You know, he has spent the last 40, or the Conservative Party has spent the last 14 years, the taxes levied on the average Brit are so high now. They're the highest since the 1970s. And it's supposed to be that, isn't it Labour and the Socialists that are supposed to be high tax and high spend? And we have a Conservative government who have the highest taxes in, you know, nearly 2 lifetimes for some people. They've got the highest spend ever, the highest level of debt ever by any government the UK has ever seen, and they're supposed to be conservative. So what the hell's going to happen when Labour get in? We're screwed. We're absolutely screwed, and it's too late.
So what you're saying is there your country? Well, not only your country, but the whole UK. The spending is out of control, is what you're saying.
Oh, completely.
How bad is your inflation there? Like, how bad? Like, on a percentage standpoint?
Well, there's the official figures that the government have been issuing, and then what people have felt in the streets. I know that on the things most needed, such as food and fuel, energy, stuff like that, has doubled and even tripled, and the wages have not kept up. There's real suffering. But the official figures take into account some luxury goods that haven't suffered the inflation just quite as well, quite as much. So the official figure from government that is worse was something like 10%, and in reality, fuel went up 50%, and almost doubled at one point. The cost of energy, electricity, and gas has nearly tripled for some people. And I said at the time that the government decided it was going to introduce this cap to prevent energy going through the roof. And I remember saying at the time, I can guarantee you every single energy company out there is just going to raise their prices up to the cap as soon as it's introduced. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, that's what they do. So, like, they say, hey, you know, this is the government's MO. This is one of their favorite things to do ever. They say, hey, we're going to give you guys a hand, right? We're going to help you out, and we're going to pass this law, and it's going to save you a little bit of money, possibly. possibly always. But what happens is they do things like that, and then whatever business jacks the price up, whatever percentage that the government was going to cover, right? It's the same thing. Like right now, they're talking about over here, particularly here in the States, where they're going to start giving homeowners a $400 allowance, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, anybody who rents, or not, I'm sorry, just everybody a $400 allowance, not just homeowners. And I'm thinking to myself, to the rental market, the rent just went up $400 because those landlords aren't going to eat that. That's just how this goes. This is the game they try to play, and then they play it, and then the people suffer. And it's almost like the global dystopians have took over. It's not just about, our country's government or your country's government. We're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing the dystopia kind of, take over all over the place with endless spending, like no end to spending. They'll spend all the money. They'll print it if they need to do it. They'll do whatever they want. And they want to go play war with everybody. Like what's Scotland's take on war? What's the UK's take on war? So like, does Scotland do whatever the UK says when it comes to helping the United States and their fuckery all over the world? Is that what's happening?
Well, Scotland doesn't have an army of its own or any sort of military. It's the UK that has the military, and they base themselves in Scotland. So a lot of the nuclear weapons are stored at Faslane, not far from Glasgow. So if the Russians were to actually start a nuclear war and with the UK, they would be aiming their missiles at Scotland instead of England.
Oh shit! So what you're saying is Scotland is kind of a haven for UK nukes?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh my God. That's got to be nerve-wracking, honestly. Like, seriously. But also, so if shit hit the fan, that means nukes could be blown off from your country then.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So a country with no army of its own, no weapons of its own, is going to be one of the biggest targets that if a nuclear war was to break out. But they store weapons here as well. It's not just England. It's baffling. Even not far from where I stay at Prestwick Airport, there's American bases there. And they frequently fly in and out just to refuel and do transfers and stuff.
Wow. Sometimes I'm at a loss for words when people tell me things, and I'm kind of there right now. Like, I had no idea that, nukes were being stored in your country, and I had no idea you guys didn't have your own military. Like, holy shit. So now let me ask you this then. Are you guys allowed to have guns? Can you have guns? Like, can you protect yourselves? Are there laws against that like there are in Australia? Like, I don't know if you caught my show last week with Lady Liberty. They really can't protect themselves there. Like, Australia has the craziest gun laws you'd ever hear, like in my opinion, outside of some other countries, but they're not allowed to really defend themselves. There's laws against self-defense. And if you say you're going to buy a gun for self-defense, they're not going to sell it to you. That's what I got from that last show. Like, wow. Like, what is it like over there in Scotland? Like, what are your gun regulations?
It's probably even worse. The simple air rifles that you get, for shooting at targets, or even just, it used to be a kid's toy at one point. I remember, playing with air rifles and air pistols in my childhood, and now they're licensed now as well. BB guns are licensed.
What? Like BB guns, like the things you buy for your kids when they're little?
You can't get them now until you're 18 and you have a license off the government, and you've got to go through the police background checks. and there's no like debate you can have if someone within the police say, no, we don't think you're the right sort of person. They don't need to give a reason. They just think, we don't want to give you a license, and that's it. And even at that, everything's got to be under lock and key and approved safes. And I was talking to somebody the other day, to even just change the barrel on a hunting rifle, or even on an air rifle, they have to apply for permission, and and get their license to change something, and they can't buy the new part until they've sold the old part, unless they get a license to have the new part as part of their arsenal. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
That's insane. Like, if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out right now. Honestly, I would be pulling my hair out right now, because this is 2 shows in a row now where both Lady Liberty and yourself are saying that you don't have the right to defend yourself. You don't have the right to really have firearms at all unless you're a good little person, and then they're going to regulate what you can and can't have. Wow, did you just see all that? I don't know what just happened, but wow. Like a bunch of glitter just fell out of the air for some reason. I have no idea where that came from. Cool. Maybe it's this new computer I just got. I don't know. This is the computer I'm using until I get my other one back. So,
yeah,
that was pretty weird, actually, to see all the confetti in the background when I did that. Anyways,
from supervisor.
But
well, sorry.
You guys,
just on the self-defense. Sorry about that. Just on the self-defense issue, it's even worse in Scotland. It's not just limited to weapons. Weapons of any sort. Any sort of gun has to be licensed, but they completely frown upon weapons of any sort. And even if it came down to a bare knuckle fisticuffs with someone trying to break into your house, you're still not allowed. It's against the law to defend yourself. If you manage to win the fight and you fend off your assailant and you contact the police to let them know that somebody just tried to break in, you yourself can be arrested, charged and imprisoned for assault. So the safest way to deal with a house break-in is to make sure no one contacts the police. So deal with the burglar and then don't contact the police. And if that means...
you need a silencer and a shovel is what you're saying.
Worst thing you can do after being the victim of a crime is to call the police, because they will come down and arrest you for defending yourself. There is, and the government would argue, and some folk would argue, that there is this sort of defence you can use, but that's in court. And you have to admit to the crime in the first place, and then put up what's known as a special defence in your trial for the use of self-defence. And it's so complicated. There's criteria that has to be met. So could you have run away? Could you have used less force than you did? Or, was your back against the wall? Could you have called for help, etc., etc.? And if you can decide that yes, you could have called for help, or you could have backed off, and everything else, then your self-defense argument is basically flung out, and you're automatically convicted because you had to admit the crime in the first place in order to put forward the defence. And it is bizarre. It's completely bizarre. It should just be no questions asked. This person was in my house. I don't know why they were there. It looked as though they were a threat, and I had to deal with them. Look, I pay enough tax as it is. You can deal with the body, no questions asked. But it's not, and it's completely unfair.
There's something I say on this show a lot, and I'm going to keep saying it. And it's going to be repetitious, but I guarantee you nobody's ever going to get sick of this comment or statement that I'm about to make. And that is, if you don't have the right to defend yourself by any means necessary, you no longer have rights as an individual at all. Like, game over. That's it. Your rights are gone. Your livelihood is gone. That means they can take whatever they want from you at any given moment. Now, here in the States, we have the Second Amendment. In the Constitution and whatnot. We have the Bill of Rights, which the Bill of Rights is probably much more of a better piece of paper than the Constitution, in my opinion. Depending on who you ask, but we do have that law to protect ourselves, but there's also laws that that they're making to take that away. Like, this is what I'm trying to get at: is the United States is still the best goddamn country to live in the entire world, still, for now. But
despite your government's efforts,
despite what they're doing at this very moment, which is a disaster. I'm not going to not say, like, our current, federal government is, in some of the states too, like most all the states are a disaster too. Mine in particular, I happen to be in Michigan with one of the top 3 worst governors in the United States. They're hammering us on a lot of shit, especially during the COVID era. But
and they're competing with each other.
Seriously, it was like Gavin Newsom says, I'm going to do this, and this. And, then all of a sudden Kathy Hochul or Karen Hochul or whatever her name is, I know it's Hochul in New York, is I'm going to do this, and this. And Gretchen Whitmer's like, yo, hold my beer, dude. We're going to do this, and this. But, we do have these laws right now that do protect us, but they are chipping away at the Second Amendment little by little. There's more and more red flag laws going up by the day, honestly. I actually have a buddy who's his buddy just got red flagged here in Michigan. Had an argument with his old lady in the driveway, dude. They had it out. They got into a shouting match. He didn't once hit her. He didn't once grab her. He didn't once do anything besides yell at her while she was yelling back. Anybody who's married or in a relationship understands this shit does happen. None
of us are perfect.
The neighbors called the cops, and the cops came and they took all his guns without due process, because that's what red flag laws are. I've been trying to get him on my show. He doesn't want to talk about it. He don't want anything to do with it. He said, you can talk about it on your show. Don't use my name. Don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. I'll respect your wishes, but I'm damn sure going to talk about it. Those police, which, by the way, the actual county sheriff of that county said they were not going to enforce said red flag laws, but because it was the local police that came, they came, confiscated his guns with no due process at all. Which is, hey, due process is due process. Like, everybody, I don't care what they're being tried for, everybody deserves a due process before anything happens outside of that. The law in itself is only supposed to protect life, liberty, and property. Anything outside of that is tyranny. Honestly, that's a Frederick Bastiat thing. That comes from The Law, the book. I highly recommend that book to anybody. The Law by Frederick Bastiat, man. Holy shit. You can read it in a day. It'll blow your mind. But, let's get back to what you guys are doing over there. Now, you're running for office. Yes?
I am. Yes.
And what are you actually running for?
Well, I'm running for a seat in the Parliament, in the UK Parliament. So it's the Kilmarnock and Loudoun constituency that I'm aiming to represent. Now, realistically, I probably don't stand a hope in hell. I'm one of 7 candidates, but I think it's only 3 3 or 4 of us are actually from within the 3, I think, actually live in that constituency, and the rest have all been parachuted in from neighbouring areas. I was kind of surprised at first when I seen that the Conservative candidate wasn't from the Kilmarnock and Loudon area. And then when I had a think about it afterwards, I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably because no one dares, after the proverbial shit show that the last government has been, nobody local wants to be associated with them. So they probably, even though they have members here and they have elected councilmen and things like that, not one of them were willing to put their name to that ballot paper.
Now,
So
you have been a part of a political regime, the Reform Party, correct?
yeah, up until recently, and that was a weird one. Some left wing blogger decided they didn't like my stance on guns and other things. So the party decided to suspend me pending an investigation that never happened. So the investigation never happened. There was no appeal process. And then the deadline passed, and they parachuted somebody in from a neighbouring constituency to represent them in this election.
And then didn't your local Libertarian Party say that you were a little bit too based, per se?
Yeah, that was another. I think it was a case of the leader decided, or not decided, but it was pretty much paranoid about things. It was a weird situation. So I ended up challenging him for the leadership because I'd heard rumours that he was trying to kick me out of the party. And then he ended up kicking me out of the party because I challenged him for the leadership.
Nice. Well, I actually love that. I love that you got kicked out of the Reform Party. I know that sounds bad, but I love that because that means you were making noise. And then the fact that the Libertarian Party was a little bit too afraid of your stances, I love that even more because really, in theory, I'm an anarchist. I don't really, in my perfect world, there's no state, there's no government, there's none of it because government only thrives on theft, chaos, and murder. So I don't see any legit reason to have that. And some of the naysayers will be like, well, the warlords will take over in an anarchist society. And I just fold my arms and go,
yeah, what
really?
What do we call this now?
Like the warlords are going to take over in an anarchist society. Have you looked around the world right now and see what's happening? Like, and they're not anarchists. I'm telling you that right now. They're far from it. But I appreciate that you are bold enough to like make people mad or upset them because we need more of that. We don't, we're at a point in the world where like we need to be done tiptoeing around people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We do need to be done with that and stop giving shit leftists any more inches to fulfill their agenda. There's going to be no more inches. We have to stop this, and not to say that the right is doing anything better, but the left is actually completely out of control and the right just happens to go along with it, which makes them no better. But they're, at least here in the United States, the left, this is what I'll give the credit to the Democrats for here in the United States, is that they are very upfront with who they are and what they're about and what they're going to do, to where the Republican Party will lie to your face and say they still care about your rights. They still care, but it's all only about the First and Second Amendment. They don't care that there's other amendments like the Fourth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. They don't care about any of that stuff. We care about your right to free speech, but only if, you're saying what our side says, or we care about your guns as long as, it's protecting our side. But if you start saying, like somebody like me says, well, I'm sorry, everybody should be able to own guns because nobody has the right to tell another person how to defend themselves, including illegal aliens. People from the right all of a sudden will be like, oh, well, we can't be having these illegal aliens owning firearms and stuff like that. They're not allowed to defend themselves. Only we are.
Well, are they not human beings too?
Right. Like, I do believe there's a border crisis here in the United States that should be dealt with. I don't believe in closing borders completely. I do believe in a little checkpoint that, just to make sure they're not, wanted for, child molestation, rapes, murders, shit like that. I'm down for that. You need to have a checkpoint that says, hey, we need to make sure you're not a bad person coming here. But hey, if you got nothing going on and they run your shit through the computer and they're like, hey, man, you're good to go. Come on in, man. We got plenty of jobs for you. There's plenty of jobs here that aren't getting filled, especially in the trade. So please come on over. I'm not against immigration at all. I just think there should be a checkpoint that makes sure, like, hey, we got to make sure these people aren't bad. That's all I'm asking for. And I don't think that's a huge ask. I really don't.
It's not a huge ask. And I'll tell you this, I used to be 100% open borders.
Same.
Pretty much they're imaginary lines drawn and fought over by competing governments or competing warlords. However, recently I was taking a stroll through a botanical garden, and I discovered that 400 million year old lichens, some of the first material growth before soils and stuff, you magnify and you can actually see that they create borders where they meet other forms of lichen. So be it on a stone or on the bark of a tree or something like that. Now, that was one of those light bulb moments where I'd always argued the laws of nature, is not something you can fight against, and that includes with theft and try to take away people's rights and other things. However, and I thought open borders was the natural thing. However, 400 million year old lichens are setting up borders. Then maybe there's an argument in nature that we do require borders of some sort. I just don't agree that they should be run by a state government. They ruin everything else, and they're going to ruin the borders just the same.
Well, yeah, like we're seeing that here in the United States. Like everything the government touches literally turns into a dumpster fire. There's no other way to explain it. Like they're in healthcare is a dumpster fire. They're in education is a dumpster fire. They are a part of the oil industry is a dumpster fire. Like literally, and it's across the board. Like whatever they touch is a disaster. Which is my biggest argument for normies. Like, hey, do you not see how bad this is when they're involved? And it's like, cut them out, bring out some real competition. Like, this is the Austrian economic way. Like, you cut out the government, you open up real competition, which will drive down prices. Like, that's the thing. Like, the government has a monopoly on everything because their hands are in everything. This is why everything's so damn expensive. You guys are seeing it over there in the UK. Like obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, is Scotland like the UK with the socialized medicine?
Yes, it is. Although arguably worse. The NHS in England do privatise out a lot of services. So although they'll have their own NHS ambulance service, they'll contract other third-party ambulance providers and paramedic providers who just simply invoice them for the work that they do. They've recently started introducing that in Scotland out of desperation, but they don't advertise it as much. what this is the worst thing. I mean, 14% of Scotland's population is currently on a waiting list for healthcare treatment. I don't mean just an appointment with the doctor. I'm talking surgeries, scans to check for cancer and things like that. 14% of the population. We are dying here. Last week, in fact, I had a guide out at work from Holland, and he had a problem with his ear, and he thought he could just go to any ear care provider and just it'd be a 2-minute job, and they done block his ear and that would be it. No, he kept getting fobbed off with excuses or told that, oh no, if you can't get a GP, you'll have to dial 111 after 6 o'clock at night to request an emergency out of hours appointment and stuff like that. Even private care facilities are saying no, it's a 2 or 3 day wait for an appointment and things like that. It's absolutely crazy for what was a simple 2-minute fix. And thankfully he did eventually. He knew he was going to be in Edinburgh at the end of the week on one of his days off, so he managed to phone a private ear clinic and they got it fixed, and it was just 2 minutes pop and that was it, done. And he's a lot better now, but the pain and discomfort and the deafness that he suffered all through his week at work while we were going around the whole of Scotland.
So then let me ask you this. Hypothetically, you find a lump somewhere, right? You're like, holy shit, I got this, foreign lump somewhere, wherever it may be on your body. You call up the doc, you say, hey, I got this lump, I'm nervous about it. When can I get in? How long would it take to get you in for something like that?
Weeks. It's a gamble. It's this 8:30 in the morning rush every morning right across the country where phone lines at doctor surgeries are jammed up because that's the only time the GP surgeries will accept incoming calls. And that is this is the unintended consequence of government sticking their noses in. So GP practices are privately owned and run. However, they're funded, they're given fixed amounts of money from the government to see patients. They get fixed amount of money per patient registered on their books. So they open a surgery with a waiting room and a reception and the other bits and pieces that go along with it. They'll hire 2 or 3 GPs, general practitioners, to work there. And then they will hoover up as many registrations as they can, regardless of whether they're actually able to see those patients or not. And it doesn't matter whether those patients are seen or not, they still get paid regardless.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And what made it worse was the government decided it's people are waiting too long to get in an appointment. So they brought in this target. They wanted to see something like 99% of, or 90+% of patients must be seen the same day by a GP. But the GP surgeries found this loophole in the targets that the government set for them. If you phone up for an appointment and there's not an appointment available that day, they will not take your name or details down. Then you're not in the system. You've hung up. You're told to try again at 8:30 the next morning, and it doesn't get registered as someone unable to get an appointment. It's only if they actually take your details and it's then on the system as someone having called for an appointment.
This is insanity. And so now that you say that, I'm going to tell you this. Here in the United States, where everybody's screaming for socialist healthcare right now, They want it. They want it bad. Like all the leftists are like, healthcare is a basic human right and blah, blah, blah. Which first off, look, y'all, there is nothing in this entire world that requires the labor of another human being that makes it a basic human right ever, period. If it takes the labor from another person, that is not a basic human right. Now, if you want to pay for it, yeah, sure. You have the right to pay for it. Yeah, that's a service that you pay for. But you're not born and just like, hey, I'm deserved all these things. Like, this isn't how this works. But, I'm glad you said it was weeks to get an appointment for something like that, because I personally just went through this. I had something I was a little worried about, and I called the doctor and I was like, yo, I'm a little bit worried about this. When can I get in? And it was weeks.
Yeah.
And we're not even at the socialist level yet, but technically we are, because the government literally subsidizes all healthcare at this point. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you don't want it, you have to take it. There's no choice. So like, when my wife and I signed up for new healthcare this year, we wanted a new provider, it didn't matter. We were given the options that we were given, and we were given the subsidy that was given. Like, we didn't have a choice in the matter. I'm like, hey, I don't want that. My wife, because she takes care of all that stuff. She's great, and I'm like, I don't want that. Tell them no. We don't want their shit, And she's like, there's no way to do it. It automatically comes like this. And I'm like, well, this is why things are the way they are. And one thing I did notice, so I went through the ringer last year with my health. I almost died, for real. Like, my insides tried to kill me. I had to have major GI surgery. It was fucked up. But when I had my first issue and I went to the hospital and started seeing doctors, I didn't have any insurance at the time. I had none. And then, by that, that was towards the end of 2022, November 22, I had all this stuff happen. I was in really bad shape. I spent 8 days in the hospital and then went home. I had a visiting nurse, IV antibiotics, all this stuff, right? I was in bad shape. So, we go through all that. I get all the bills for that, right? And they didn't they were high, but considering, I'm like, these don't seem as bad as one would think. Now, the first of that year in 2023, I had insurance, and every doctor visit doubled. Literally doubled. My office visits for the doctor before I had insurance were $200. My office visits after I had insurance were $450. So people wonder why, shit gets so expensive. That's exactly why. I saw it firsthand. I saw it with my own eyes. I couldn't believe it. And the same thing went through for all the CT scans and all the testing and the blood work and everything they did. Pre-insurance was half of what it was post-insurance, because I had another episode after I had insurance and the bills were much different. And this is because the government has created a monopoly in the healthcare system to where you're stuck with this, whatever they decide to give you and whatever subsidy they decide to give you, correct? You don't have a choice in the matter. They don't give you a choice. You're stuck with these subsidies no matter what. Personally, and this is why healthcare has become so expensive, by the way. There was a time where you could have a doctor come to your house and give you a checkup for $50 here in the States. They would come to your house for $50. Now it's over, $200 just to go there. And that's before they give you any medication or anything like that. That's just for them to, say, hey, what's up? Get you a couple questions, maybe stick a thing on your heart and get your heartbeat, all that stuff. A stethoscope, that's what that is, But here we are. And now you guys have this. Now, let me ask you something. You work your ass off, obviously. How much money do they take from you from taxation? because you have all the socialized healthcare and stuff. Like, what's your percentage of your money that they take from your pay every week?
Probably close to now. We have different levels of taxation. It's not a straight figure. So there's the national insurance, there's the income tax, and all these other things, and there's even VAT on products, which is, I think, probably closely resembles your sales tax. I think it is. And then you get alcohol and fuel duties, and stuff like that, insurance duty and stuff like that. So there's a lot of hidden tax. Vast majority of tax is hidden. At the bottom of the paycheck, they'll claim it's only like 42% or something. And in reality, by the time you've actually spent your money, you're probably closer to 80 or 90% as tax.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, holy shit.
Well, take a litre of fuel, for example. I think it's currently around about £1.50 for a litre of fuel. Don't ask me what that is in gallons at your end, because it's.
I believe there's 2 liters to a gallon. I'm almost positive, or roughly somewhere around there. It might not be exact, but it's roughly 2 liters to a gallon, I believe.
All right. Well, our gallon must be different from yours. Our gallon is about 8 liters, 5 liters, no, 8 liters, something like that. To a gallon, something like that. It's weird. I'll need to double check that.
I might be wrong then. Maybe, holy shit. Let's ask the phone. How many liters are to a gallon? Because now I'm going to look like an idiot. How many liters to a gallon? Oh yeah, 3. So almost 4 liters to a gallon. 3.79 liters to a gallon. So I was a little off by double almost.
If I don't even know if a US gallon, a UK gallon is exactly the same, but I can't imagine them being too far off. But assuming it is, 4 liters for argument's sake, that would be £6 per gallon, which I think is, what's that, $10-12, something like that.
We right now, for a gallon of gas, and it's not even a true gallon here in the States, when they tell you a gallon of gas, it's really 9/10 of a gallon. It's not a whole gallon. And so we're roughly $4 a gallon here in Detroit, give or take 20 or 30 cents, depending on where you're at. Here in Detroit, it's about $4. I paid $4.09 last week, but then I got my buddy who lives in white suburbia who paid about 75% less than I did. You know what I mean? So it's all like, the luck of the draw or whatever they decide they're going to do. But that's wild, man. Like here in the States, we're taxed about, income tax is roughly 30-35%, depending on, who you are and what you're doing. But that's not it. You got your property tax. You have a take a shit tax. You literally have a tax on taking a shit. Like you have a tax on toilet paper, and you have to pay for your water, right? You have a tax on gasoline.
Same here.
You have a tax. Seriously though, people think it's hilarious when I say that, but I'm like, dude, you're literally being taxed to take a shit. Like, that's wild. For real. To do a bodily function, you are being taxed for that. There's taxes on driving. You have to pay a tax for your car just to keep it on the road every year. Like, property taxes alone are stupid. They're un-American. There should be no property tax at all. It goes against the American dream of owning land, because really you don't own shit. Oh, there's that confetti again. What is going on here? This new computer is great, you guys. Let me tell you. Wow, this confetti's flying. This is funny. But, apparently it likes taxation. I don't know. Who knows? But, we end up paying half our money to the government. Half our money's gone. Maybe even a little more, honestly. But by the time you pay all your taxes on your food and your gas and whatever you're buying, clothing, you know, you have sales tax, there's state tax, there's property tax. Dude, you got to pay a tax to die. You're taxed to die here in the United States. You know,
it's the same here.
At what point where does it end? Where does it end? And where is your money really going? And how are you being represented by your government after being taxed all that? Because the way I see it, you're not being represented by your government. We are not being represented by our government. Our Lady Liberty over there in Australia is not getting represented by her government. You know, and I know, you know, all these places don't have this, you know, quote unquote constitution that talks about taxation without representation. Well, this is what we have in the United States right now, which should be quote unquote illegal if you look at it on paper. Like, taxation without representation is a thing. And here in the United States government only represents people outside of the United States. They don't represent us at all. At all, not in the least bit. And the receipts are, look at all the money they're sending to Ukraine. Look at all the money they're sending to Israel and Taiwan and wherever the hell else they're sending money to. While I have people living under bridges 2 miles down the road. I live just down the road from that infamous 8 Mile that everybody knows thanks to Eminem. Hey, there's that again. Holy shit. But anyway, but no, like, we're not being represented. You know, our veterans get treated like shit. They have their, you know, anybody who knows about the VA hospital, if you want to take a look at what socialist healthcare would look like, look no further than our VA hospital, who takes care of our veterans who are quote unquote defending this country or who have defended this country, right?
Well, do you want to hear something very controversial on the subject of veterans?
Absolutely.
Right, here goes. And this is extremely unpopular, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you're dumb enough to sign up for the army, you deserve it. You know fine well you're not going to get looked after. You know fine well you're going to get used and abused, and you're going to get left to rot when you come back. You hardly get paid a thing, and they're just going to treat you like dirt when you get back. Why would you sign up in the first place? Let them fight their own battles. If they want to go to war, hand them the keys to a Jeep and say, off you go. Don't sit in your cushy wee office and order other folk to do it. Just don't sign up for the military at all whatsoever. They're going to treat you like shit. Don't do it. And if you do, don't say I didn't warn you. Hell mend you. I'm not going to help you when you come back.
Man, you just kind of hit the nail on the head. But it's unfortunate. Like, I don't know what it's like for you guys there, and you can tell me after I tell you this here. You know, we're kind of raised here in the United States that, you know, fighting for your country is this, you know, great thing, and you'll be honored and loved and whatnot if you do this. Like, you grow up in school, they tell you all these things. You know, they have all the great commercials about joining the military and blah blah blah. You know, do they do that over there?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the same. You know, when they have their anniversaries for the different wars and things like that, and they have all these celebrations and Remembrance Day and all sorts of stuff like that. And it just seems to have been politically hijacked as some sort of propaganda method rather than actually remembering what it was originally for. The UK has went to war so many times, but I don't know when the last time. When was the last time the UK was actually under threat? The war with Argentina in 1982, when Argentina invaded the Falklands. The Falklands asked for help. They were a UK state, even though it was halfway around the world. And that was the last time a monarch actually asked for intervention by a government to say, we need you to send troops over. One of our islands have been invaded. Prior to that, it was the Germans in the Second World War. I don't remember any Iraqis or Afghanistans coming to our shores and in trying to invade the UK. So why are we at war with them? It's baffling, and it just means conspiracy theorists are getting proven right so many times, or certainly even if they're not proven right without reasonable doubt, there's certainly an argument to be made that maybe it's worth listening to their argument now instead of just automatically dismissing them. There's far too many things come to light in recent days, in recent weeks and months, to just automatically dismiss the conspiracy theorists anymore.
And that's the thing, like, the conspiracy theory thing that they throw around, and they still use that term everywhere. The first time the conspiracy theory label was ever thrown around was after the JFK assassination.
Uh-huh.
And that conspiracy theory turned out to be true. Straight up. The United States government killed JFK, the CIA in particular. Some would say the Mossad was involved with that. There's not enough time to get into all that, really. But, the fact of the matter is that at this point, within the last 4 years of dystopia after the COVID nonsense that pretty much every country saw with the lockdowns and the shutting down of businesses and forcing people to take, quote unquote vaccines that were supposed to be good for them, which we all know by now that, a lot of people died because of those pokes. Yeah, I just said that out loud, and I'll probably get in trouble for this on YouTube. I don't really care. But dudes, like, we're at a point now where it's stand up or lay down. Mm-hmm. And for me, laying down is not an option. We're not doing it. We really need to stand up for ourselves. You guys need to stand up for yourselves over there. You have a big election on the 4th of July over in the UK, which I brought up earlier, and I'm bringing it up again because, like, it's hilarious because why do Americans celebrate the 4th of July? Well, it kind of had something to do with the whole UK and England thing, whatever. But they're having their presidential election on July 4th, and that's kind of a big deal. It's kind of weird too that they're doing that there. But, is that when your election is? Like, is that when you can be voted for?
Yes, same day. Yes. It is unusual that it is July. Normally, it is the first Thursday in May every 5th year. But this is what's known as a snap general election, but it's been called early, because the previous one was a snap one, and it was just recent elections have just been absolutely bizarre.
Right.
My own strengths. I'm not really the best person to be a politician. I get into too many controversies and things like that. And
this is why I like you so much. Really, truly, it's why I like you so much.
My strengths are actually behind the scenes, supporting other people who are candidates. I do a lot of marketing stuff and promotions and organising materials, planning things out. When my wife last stood in 2019 for this constituency, she was polling only about 100 votes. She was standing for the Libertarian Party here in Scotland. And I had designed and built a campaigning structure and database to test during her election campaign. And we actually, she went from having been polled at less than 100 votes to ending up with over 405 votes, which pales and it's insignificant in the grand scheme of things. You'd have to have somewhere like 15,000, 16,000 votes to win the election at a local level. So 400 is nothing in the scale of things. But my system brought a return of 400% compared to what she was polled to actually receive. And at the moment, she still holds a record for any Libertarian Party member in the UK for votes in a single UK constituency election. So it's that. Although that database isn't running at the moment, I do, want to make everyone aware that I'm willing to get it back up and running. But it's whether people are actually willing to use it. I mean, it's not cheap to run, but it's not exactly super expensive either. We're talking only like 15, 20 quid a month, something like that, per candidate who actually wants to use it. So they just have to be willing to actually learn how to use it and start using it. And the genius of it is that the more it's used, the better and more effective it actually is. So even if you're not the candidate that come the next election, the information you have added benefits the person who's then using it after you. So it's, it's even simple functions such as clues at people's doors. So you're going knocking on doors, you get clues. So you would go with someone would stand back and just listen while the candidate is at the door, taking down any little clues. So if there's stickers and cars parked outside around the drive and stuff like that, or if the person actually tells you, oh no, I'm voting for such and such a party, you can get an idea whether that person is likely to be a swing voter or whether it's a waste of time. So in future, fine well, it's on the database. Oh, this person's a diehard SNP fan, not even going to bother chatting their door. Saves you time to actually campaign on people whose minds you can change. It also links in with the electoral register, the register of everyone registered to vote. If there's a house with no one registered to vote, don't bother wasting your time chatting the door. There's no value to be gained. But there is value from a libertarian perspective. Why are they not registered to vote? Is it a waste of time? Can you go at a time in between elections and say, have that conversation? I noticed no one at this house was registered to vote. Is there a reason for it? Oh, so, you've got this sort of libertarian stance. I'll run in the next election. Do you fancy registering and actually lending me your vote? So there's value to be had in being able to identify all these doors. Even the likes of the database even had there's this law in Scotland that you can't chap a door that has a sticker saying no cold collars and things like that, and it's a criminal offence, or no junk mail and stuff like that. So if you could actually record when you're out leafleting, you can record on the database what doors have that, and then you can take it off that database and actually write to them with direct mail, which isn't against the law. So as part of an election campaign, you're allowed to send out election campaign letters to people on the electoral register, and you can minimise the amount of printing costs and things like that by sending it out only to rural properties that won't get leaflets delivered, or even nursing homes where you can't go in with leaflets, you can't go campaign, and you can send the residents direct letters. Homeless hostels, again, some homeless people are registered to vote. You can send letters direct to them at their hostel, even though you can't go in and campaign, but you can still get in touch with them. So all these things can be worked on as part of a bigger plan. And that actually helps people with their campaigns.
Oh, and that's awesome. Now, let me ask you this, because you are part of the Township Liberation Crew, which I love so much. I love Mike Decentralized has come up with something that is very cool. I'm glad to be a part of it. I know you're listening, Mike. I love you, man. and you're doing cool shit. And thank you for, allowing me to jump on board with this, dude. He was just on a couple weeks ago. But the township liberation thing is all about decentralization and nullification, which is something I've been preaching about on this show since the beginning. I started this show in January of 22, and I've been preaching decentralization and nullification the whole time. Is that even a possibility the way your guys' political landscape is over there in the UK? Like, can you decentralize and can you nullify your way away from the federal government that you guys have there? Are you protected to do that, or is that something you got to work for, a little more?
You've got to work for it, and you have to be careful as well, because the way it used to be that councils had a lot of say and control over their own budgets at local level for a town or area. And then since the SNP came to power nearly 20 years ago within the government, they have centralised almost everything. So they collect all the money nationally, and then they send it to councils ring-fenced to spend on things. So the councils barely get to set any sort of budget of their own. They still get to collect the property tax, the council tax as we call it here. And that's one of the taxes I call a slave tax. So it's due to be paid regardless of your ability to pay it. So there's, and then you have to apply for some sort of discount or exemption or anything else, but you can't just say, oh well, I don't have a job, I don't have any income, I don't need to pay it. It doesn't work like that. So yeah, there are some limited options. One of the options is that if you can get elected to council as a councillor and get onto some of the committees, you can pretty much vote against everything and hope to stifle the system into some sort of paralysed state. So if the councils have this sort of proportional representation sort of thing. So it's very rare to actually get a council with out and out power by one particular party. So if you manage to get yourself in, there's a good possibility that with many things you could upset the balance of power and keep voting things down so that nothing ever gets done. And that's one way. Another way is that we have volunteer councils called community councils. They have to be consulted on for things like planning and other things, and the police report to them about crime rates and figures and things. But they can also raise money independently without taxation. So where I live, I don't have a community council. One needs to be established, and it's quite a large area, so getting the bodies required is actually quite difficult. And I've been trying for some years and just trying to knock heads together, trying to get 20 odd people out of a population of about 3,000 people is quite difficult. But one of the ways I would look to use a community council for is simply to see what local concerns are about different things and look for tax-free ways of supplying that community service without relying on begging the government for money and things like that, and being able to basically prove to other people that, yeah, libertarian options are viable. It's that old who would build the road sort of thing. Well, a community council could raise money and start filling in potholes and stuff like that without a single, cost to the taxpayer. Looking after their own roads, their own street lights, their own hanging baskets. Don't get me started on hanging baskets, and planters and grass cutting projects, and maybe even having a team of volunteers or raising the funds voluntarily, where they can have a small crew that go around helping people who can't afford to cut their own grass in their own garden, for example. They might be able to set up a project where they go around cutting the grass, or maybe even replacing the grass with community fruit gardens and things like that, so that people who maybe have disabilities or just simply can't afford to look after their own garden, and it's become completely overgrown, they can hand responsibility of that garden over to a small team, voluntarily funded to look after. So all these are real possible options to demonstrate that we don't need tax to live in a civilized society. Tax itself is completely uncivilized, completely authoritarian. It's just pure violence. And I'm at the stage now, if anyone suggests, oh, we should pay more tax, and it's like, no, you mean somebody else, and you want to threaten them with violence, you violent individual, so and so. I'm trying my best not to swear.
Well, that's right. And as my boy Blooded the Brave says in one of his songs, like, theft is theft, and that violates my rights, and it doesn't matter. It threatens my life. You know, that's what one of my homies says in one of his rap songs, and it's correct. But before we take off, man, because we're running out of time, Stephen, you're running for office, and I know some people from where you're at are going to want to hear from you. So let's hear about your campaign. What are you about, and how can people help you out? Like, let's do it.
Well, my main focus for this election campaign is actually on expenses that MPs claim, members of Parliament claim. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous. There was a big scandal a decade or two ago. One MP even claimed to have a duck pond built in their garden, and it was absolutely ridiculous. It was supposed to be for office expenses, and basically, if you had to write letters or employ people to help with your admin and things like that, that's what the expenses were for. I have enough knowledge of some databases and admin systems and things that I could use modern technology to do away with a huge amount of the expenses involved in running a office for a member of Parliament. So I'd be primarily campaigning on that front, basically with the promise that, for want of a better word, because I hate the word promise, but on this sort of commitment to have the least amount of expenses claimed by any sitting MP ever, hopefully, or at least in lifetime, in the recent lifetime. Even to the point where I could arguably say that I might even be able to get the expenses claimed down to absolutely zero, and just use my own salary to cover the basics, to employ someone to help with the office work, to commute up and down to London, to go and sit in the Parliament and cast my vote. And on top of that, I'd be pretty much looking to stifle as much, vote against everything, because it doesn't matter what the government intends to do, it's never going to work, it's going to cost a fortune, and really don't trust them. So even if they promised, oh, we do this, it's going to end homelessness forever, I'd be voting against it, because I know fine well that's just a lie, and there'll be something in that bill going through to be passed as law that is nothing to do with homelessness and is going to line their own pocket somewhere. So no, I'll be voting pretty much against everything.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of like the libertarian standpoint in a nutshell. Is like, you vote no on things that are going to cost money or that are going to violate rights. it's one of those things, like, it's not like libertarians don't want to spend money. Libertarians like to spend money, but they want to spend money on things that are important.
Mhm.
Like, getting things done, getting things, helping people who are in need, but doing it in a voluntary way, like taxation. I don't care how anybody spins it. Taxation's slavery. Some will call it theft, some will call it extortion. To me, it's slavery, because there is never a point where a man or a woman is entitled to another's uh, labor without consent.
Mhm.
Ever. There's never a time
Well,
where that's okay. It's
that's
not.
it.
It's wrong.
It's hitting the nail on the nail on the head again, and it's one of the questions I ask the socialists on social media all the time. How much of my time away from my family and my children and my wife do I have to take in order for you to be able to spend what you want? And if you word it that way, they can't answer it, and how much time away from your family you've got to spend.
And I'm glad you
The,
said it like that. Thank you. Because it's not just about labor. Because if you take someone's labor, you're taking more of their time away from their families so they can support their families. Like, wow, dude, like, people really want you to just give them everything and not think about the other side of things. Like, they just think you just go and make money and don't have, a life outside of your job, right? They don't worry about your wife and kids that you're away from, because you have to work more in order to provide more for your family, because the state is taking so much away.
yeah, and
People,
at best it's a zero-sum game. There's never any benefit to actually having a tax system in the first place. It always costs you more than what you're going to get back.
and that's the thing. Like, they say they need money for XYZ. But in order for XYZ to happen, they have to build a ministry of this, and this, and employ this person, this person, this person, this person. And all of a sudden, XYZ could have costed, say, hypothetically, $20,000. But because they had to employ all these people and have a ministry for this, and this, all of a sudden it's 500 grand.
I will give you one. I know we're running short of time, but I'll give you this one really quick example on that exactly. The Scottish government started mumbling about uh, issuing free sanitary products to women who need it. And there was a study done. They said that, oh, there's girls in school that are so poor they can't get sanitary towels and things like that. We need to start handing them out for free in schools, this, that, and the next thing. They actually done a study, and there was something in the region, out of the whole population of Scotland, there was something in the region of 500 children, girls estimated to be below a poverty line, where they were struggling to get the sanitary towels through their parents' own income. So I done the math, and based on the actual cost of those products for an entire year to supply those 500 girls with sanitary products would cost just under £20,000. They decided to go ahead with this scheme to supply free sanitary towels through all the food banks and through all the schools and the doctor surgeries and everything else. They had to go and employ people to actually run the administration, costing millions for something that would have cost less than £20,000 if they just bought them and handed them out.
Which
It
is
was
why
madness.
taxation is bullshit.
Exactly.
Straight up, dude. But
So,
Steven,
yeah,
dude, thank you so much for your time, man. We should end this now, man. I
and
appreciate
thank
what
you.
you're doing out there. I appreciate you trying to bring liberty over there in the UK. I know that's a hard sell, but somebody's got to do it, and I don't see anybody better. So you're the man. How can we find you? How can people get a hold of you and whatnot? Give us your socials and all that good stuff before we go.
I will. Yeah, I'm usually pretty active in socials, and I have some people helping me out, because if I don't say that, the police will assume it's me that tweets all those offensive things and have me arrested and imprisoned. So I have a small team, and they can't prove who tweeted what. So that's my legal defence.
Perfect.
But yeah, at StephenMcLbrtrn, something like that. Just Stephen McNamara, Kilmarnock, on, search me through any search engine. I'm usually there, pretty easy to find. On the same day, I'm getting my name dragged through the red top rags as a party leader that kicked me out is openly blackmailing an MP. You'll find that there as well. So yeah, you'll also find news stories of how at one point I was under a bridge myself with nothing but the clothes in the back of my that I was wearing, and I worked my way back up to the position I'm in now. So there's a lot. You just need to search for me using my name and Kilmarnock or Scotland online. Easy to find on pretty much most social media platforms.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again. Good luck on your campaign. And I'm sure we're going to run into each other on X as we always do. But until next time, peace, love, and liberty, y'all. Be good.